Welcome to the Connected Enterprise Podcast. This is Carl Lewis, your host from Vision33, and my guest today is Roselle Rogers from Circa. Roselle is a vice president there. Roselle, welcome to the podcast. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, the company, and your role there.
Hi, Carl, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on the Connected Enterprise. I'm Roselle Rogers, and I'm Circa's Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I've been in HR, compliance, and DEI for over 30 years, and 16 years of that has been with Circa. So I currently drive our internal and external DEI strategy, as well as our thought leadership strategy, which takes me to a lot of webinars, conferences, as well as presentations like today. So our company, Circa, is a firm believer in diversity, that diverse teams have the power to transform business. And we work with over 5,000 companies who are interested in creating a more diverse and inclusive workplace. And we do that through diversity training, through diversity strategy, analytics, and affirmative action compliance. So I'm very excited to be here and talk about DEI.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we talked a few weeks ago, and it appeared to me, and we were talking about it a bit then, that, a lot of companies have a too small a definition of diversity. And that, you said something to me then that really sort of, said, well, there's so much more involved here than a lot of people think of. How would you wrap a definition around diversity that, would help us to expand that vision?
When people talk about diversity, what I find is that many people think of it as just race and gender, right? So, but diversity is so much larger and it goes beyond race and gender. It can encompass everything that would differentiate us from one another, you and me. And that could be race, it could be ethnicity, could be national origin, sex, gender identity, and it could even be our age, religion, could be veteran status, disability, as well as our thinking styles, our education background, our socioeconomic backgrounds, including political thought. Those are all dimensions of diversity. We believe that better decisions are made when you have complementary perspectives and you consider complementary perspectives, and companies benefit from that.
It's interesting, one of the oldest things that I remember is a discussion that I learned in early management education was that, if we don't have a little contention at the table and we only plan A, if plan A fails, we don't have plan B. So it's like it's the collection of voices and the different ideas that matter. And when we bring different experiences to the table, we can come away much stronger because of it. I like that idea a lot.
Yeah. When you bring in multiple perspectives, you will come up with multiple ways of solving a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you benefit from that. So you avoid groupthink and you allow for the vetting of ideas and for the more superior idea to emerge.
Yeah, I have found that extremely helpful, that people from different backgrounds, whatever they may be, and even I have found that they might even live down the street, 2 houses away from me, they still have a different perspective. And those voices are really important. I've been privileged over the last 14 years now, almost at my company as long as you've been at yours, to work for a company that's been successful in kind of creating a very diverse workforce. But I wonder, you talk about the benefits of this sort of diversified collection of people that work together. What are some of the benefits that you see companies receiving that are very tangible, that we could get our heads around?
There's a lot of research that point to that fact, and we're not going to recount all of them here, but there's a McKinsey study that shows that companies who are in the top quarter of gender diversity are 15% more likely to have better financial returns. That's documented across multiple companies. And those who are in the top quartile of racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have better financial performance. So just think about it. If you assemble multiple perspectives, you encourage healthy debate, you encourage vetting of ideas, as I mentioned, but also if you are staffing your front line with people who reflect the demographic pools that your company serves, your customers, you create connection right away, don't you? And you're better able to build customer loyalty and customer connection. But those kinds of benefits do not happen overnight. So just because you assemble a diverse team of people, it's a cause and effect thing. It doesn't. Bringing them in is one thing. There's still work to be done, Carl. It's not
Right.
like you just bring them in and then passively wait for beautiful things to happen. No, for you to actually reap the benefits that the McKinsey study says, it requires the company to invest in inclusion. So the link between diversity and performance requires work in between that. So it won't result, for example, in greater innovation if people don't feel like they belong or that they are fearful of speaking up, or there would be repercussions for coming up with the wrong idea or being discounted for the ideas they present, right? So there are two parts to the equation, and you need to have a mix of the right people, a diverse group of people, as well as the right environment that will, and the right conditions to make it work. You need inclusive people management practices to encourage people to grow and develop in your organization. And if you're doing all of that, then and taking all of those impactful actions to create the right conditions, then you will definitely reap those benefits. So you ask, what are those benefits, right? First of all, you'll see an improvement in employee. If you create that culture, you'll see an improvement in employee relations. People respecting each other just creates good, positive employee relations. And when you have good employee relations, you will see a decline in claims, in retaliation and employment claims, right? You'll also see a reduction in turnover rates because people like where they are. You're engendering greater commitment. And you'll see a greater number of employees from underrepresented groups moving towards supervisory leadership and management positions because you're fostering learning, you're allowing everybody to have an opportunity to grow and develop. You'll see increase in employee job satisfaction, increases in employee engagement, and you'll see an increase in the level of comfort of employees willing to disclose who they are. I'll give you one example. Here at Circa, our level of disclosure of people, of employees who identify that they have a disability is 1 out of 4 employees, 25, almost 25%.
Hmm.
That's high. And to me, I'm proud of that because to me, that's a measure and indicator of safety, psychological safety, and our culture of inclusion. People are not going to disclose that they have a disability if they think that there's going to be retaliation or steering or that they're going to be stereotyped, right? So those kinds of metrics are indicators. So when you see that rise in your organization, that means that people are more willing to be authentic selves at work. And when they are authentic, they have a stronger sense of belonging. They feel like they belong in your organization. And when you have that, you build a stronger connection between your employees and their work that they do for your organization, between your employees and your company. And that kind of strong connection results in greater motivation, a higher level of passion. And to me, as an HR and an organizational development practitioner, that is what unlocks discretionary effort, right? The discretionary effort and time where that the employees give of themselves to the organization to pour their hearts and minds into their work and really think about the interests of the organization when they're doing their work. And that's what will show up in your retention numbers. That's what will show up in your innovation numbers. That's what will show up in your productivity numbers. And at the end of the day, those are the metrics that any organization, any CEO or executive team would be interested in. And that's why we say diversity is good for the entire organization. It's not just good for certain underrepresented groups, because the benefit that you get from diversity benefits everybody in the organization. And that's a promise of D&I.
One of the things that I have noticed, our company is a consulting company, not in the same exact line of work as yours, a little more on the technology side of things, is that as our workforce has been more diverse over the years, our customers have become more diverse as well. And our
Mhm.
ability to serve our customers seems to have increased as our workforce has become more diverse. It's like our customers see themselves in our workforce, and we see ourselves in our customers. It's an interesting dynamic that occurs that brings that kind of value to our customers as well from a more diverse working group of people.
Yeah, there are statistics that point to that, that diverse companies not just have better financial performance, but to get there, one of the indicators and stepping stones is that they're also, not only are they more innovative, they also enjoy a greater market share and penetration into those demographic groups. So if you're able to penetrate new markets, your company will end up enjoying a greater market share overall, which will result in greater financial performance.
It occurs to me, and I have a few miles on me, as they say. So I haven't always worked where I'm at. And I can say that some places where I have worked are far better at creating a diverse environment in the workplace than others. What's some advice that you might give to people who say, I think you're right. I think having a more diverse workforce would be beneficial to my company and serve us in many ways. How do we begin? What do we do to, without, as we were talking earlier, without kind of creating our own affirmative action, endeavor? How do we just begin to have a more diverse group of people that are working here?
Sure. I think it all starts with analyzing where your candidate sources are. Who or what are your top sources of applicants, and how diverse is that pipeline that you're getting from them? And then where do you need to diversify more? And if you're not really, or if you haven't paid any attention to hiring, for example, people with disabilities, veterans or older workers or LGBTQ or indigenous populations, then you need to think about adding sources like that to your list, right? The question that we often at Circa encounter is, it's too much work. Number two, I don't even know where to start. I don't know what those organizations are and how to find them. Well, they could Google, right? However, they're already overburdened with work. They have like 100 requisitions and they need to fill them yesterday. And so there's a time crunch. But what they could do is to, if you really want your recruiters to engage in outreach, you have to make it easy for them. And my suggestion would be to give them the tools, put the tools at their fingertips. What are some of those tools? Give them outreach tools. For example, give them access to tools that will enable to unlock, let's say, a database or a directory of organizations that serve and provide employment services, for example, to those targeted underrepresented groups from coast to coast, regardless of where they're recruiting, right? Circa offers one such tool. So not only is it a database of about 15,000 organizations who have opted in to receive job leads and then circulate it to their membership and match those jobs to their membership. Recruiters also can go inside the tool and connect directly and follow up directly with those organizations. So when you make it easy for them like that, you are more likely to get their cooperation. But if you just say, we have this diversity goal, we want you to go and reach out to organizations. Well, if you are a company based in Chicago and you're recruiting in 50 locations, how do you know who to reach out to in Buffalo, New York, for example, or in Boise, Idaho? You can't know all of those. And so having access to tools like what I described is going to make it a lot easier for them to be able to start their outreach and take the step forward towards diversifying your candidate pipeline.
I think also, one of the interesting things is a lot of companies, there's still challenges recruiting qualified people today.
Mhm.
And one of my friends said, that recently they kind of went through some of this, looking at it and say, well, we're still using the same 4 or 5 sources to recruit from that we've always used, and we're coming up dry. And they began using some other sources and found other candidates, kind of hidden gems that, weren't from the same old place all the time. And so all of a sudden, over the last year, because of need, right, they found themselves experiencing a more diverse workforce. Um, People with the talent they were looking for, but they came from completely different pools than they used to. And
Yeah.
this was a great, they were surprised by it, right, in particular. And they're pretty happy with their decision. You know, we've talked about some of the benefits, but there have to be challenges also to call it the transitioning to a more diverse collective of people, and working in that environment. As I mentioned before, I've got a few miles on me, and I just noticed the other day I was talking with somebody, and referring to Christmas, and then it dawned on me the person I was talking to was Jewish. And so, I mean, because we're friends, that was fine, and we can get through that. But I would see that as a challenge, that you have to remember that maybe not everybody is culturally in the same place as you, and so your awareness of things has to modify a bit. Are there other things you have to be aware of also?
Yes, absolutely. I like giving this example to people to help them better understand what it's like, right? It's like bringing together a symphony, individuals speaking in different voices, but we need to sing the same tune, right? And work in harmony with each other. And if you're not working in harmony together, you just create dissonance, and then you have a negative impact on the effectiveness of your team. So the key to creating great music is understanding what we each bring to the table: the cello, the trumpet, the piano, and the violin. That's us, right? As people, we all have different backgrounds that have value when we are able to actually bring it out and leverage it to work in synthesis, in harmony with each other. Individually, we can play good music, but we can create something greater together, right? But we need to work together. And this is where I think the rubber meets the road a lot of times with diversity. Being able to bring those diverse perspectives together requires skill, requires the ability to create harmony, skill in eliciting ideas to begin with, bringing those out, bringing the music of the piano and the violin out, right? The beauty of that, engaging in active listening, knowing how to resolve conflicts well, how to evaluate ideas, and then challenging the notions and practices that we have been so used to in the past. Because just because something has been done this way in the past doesn't mean that we cannot do it better, or that we cannot adapt it to new situations that emerge. So, for example, there are a lot of misconceptions about diversity. We talked about the gender and race. We need to break that myth. We also need to break the myth of diversity being a zero sum game, that in order for us to give to underrepresented groups, you have to take away from other people. That's not true, because an organization, as its name implies, it's a dynamic, growing organization, right? And then we talked about earlier about people thinking that they are quotas, that they are mandates. They're not, they're goals, right? And you're still, at the end of the day, evaluating people based on merit, based on job criteria that is uniform and applied across the board. The key that we're saying is that let's do what we can to bring in the right pipeline and balance out that pipeline so that you have just as many diverse candidates competing for the same opportunity as non-diverse candidates. Because when you balance out that pipeline, the probability of your outcomes being more equal as well are higher. Right now, our pipelines are kind of lopsided because of our existing practices, right? We need to, shore that up and do more as far as bringing in and pulling in diverse candidates. And then, of course, just because you assembled a diverse work team That doesn't mean that the unconscious biases that we have been accustomed to or pre-programmed with all of a sudden magically disappear. They don't, right? So we need to be cognizant of those biases and work towards those and make sure that we are communicating well with each other, that we're not letting our own stereotypes and assumptions rule that, and that we are becoming more, good allies to each other. So those are the things that we can do to overcome the challenges that can arise from having different views and different perspectives in an organization.
Absolutely. It's happening in other parts of our lives as well. It's not just a business issue. Even in our personal lives, my son married a woman who's from Hispanic background. And so we invite them to Thanksgiving dinner, and lo and behold, they don't like turkey. So now tamales are part of our Thanksgiving. So
Why
I
not?
think, yeah, why not, right? And so, I think it just adds a new flavor to the
Yeah,
meal, right?
yeah.
And to the family as a whole. And you're stronger because of it. And
Mm.
you have fun with it and enjoy it and learn something new along the way. So if today some of our listeners, and these are, small, medium-sized businesses, they're working in their own companies and they would like to advocate, for a more diverse workforce. And maybe they realize that we're having trouble finding people to fill these roles. Maybe we need to expand our audience of potential candidates that are out there. How does one begin to advocate, for a more diverse workforce?
Well, first of all, I think we need to understand that if you're inside an organization, right, it doesn't mean that we as employees are just passively receiving culture, right? That we just passively experience that we're not part of creating that, right? Because we do co-create it as employees. If we're looking, if our dream is to have a diverse and inclusive workforce, we need to understand that we're one of the people that create that. There are three distinct groups that I say are responsible for creating culture, and that's the organization in and of itself, through the values, the mission, the policies, the leadership, and its management practices, as well as what does it incentivize and place value on, right? Because those incentives influence how people in the organization behave. Um, and then there you have your managers, and managers are important because they impact and control the day-to-day experience of your employees. We all know the thing that people leave because of their managers. They don't necessarily leave the company, right? So, and then there's the work team, our coworkers, and our relationship with them, how they make us feel we belong, and how we make them feel, right? So, to answer your question, we can advocate for inclusivity, but we can also, more importantly, create that by practicing inclusion within our sphere, within our capacity, either as leaders of the organization, either as managers or as co-workers, right? And it starts with our day-to-day actions and the choices we make every day. For example, at the individual level, I'll just cite some examples. Do you speak up when you see or witness exclusionary behavior, right? Do you interrupt when you see someone talking over someone who is part of an underrepresented group, or discounting their ideas, right? Or ignoring what they say? Or if you are a manager, do you call people in to take part in conversations, especially those voices that you rarely hear from or don't speak up as often? And do you create ways or avenues for them to send in ideas ahead of time before a meeting or before a brainstorming session so that you get to hear their ideas, regardless of whether they speak at the meeting or not? And then do you account for neurodiversity, because we all have different abilities, right? Or even variations in learning styles, or adjust your management style. And do you try to avoid, let's say, scheduling meetings during Ramadan out of respect for your team members who might be fasting or observing the holiday. And then third, and also very important, as an organization, do you celebrate multicultural diversity, and do you use those occasions as opportunities to educate your employees, to expand their cross-cultural competency, right? Do you offer training, DEI, in bias? Do you have roundtable discussions within the organization so that they can normalize conversations around D&I? And then, aside from sourcing diverse candidates, do you evaluate your own selection process or possible bias, right? Because you can bring them in, but what if you're bringing them in, but they're never making it through the selection process, Carl? Is there something wrong there? Is there something that needs to be investigated? Are they falling out at certain stages in disproportionate numbers compared to non-diverse candidates? And if they are, what's the reason for being rejected? Is that a job-related criteria? Or were they rejected because somebody said they're not, right? Can you quantify that?
Right, right.
Are biases playing into that? And so being aware of that and creating those opportunities for us to question existing practices and be aware if there are any issues or biases or barriers that we're creating there, those are some ways that an organization can actually take action to debias their management processes. And one other way would be auditing your own pay practices to make sure that there's no pay gap between genders or even across underrepresented groups performing the same job. So there are many things. There are many things that you can do beyond, you can advocate, but you can also, start taking action to actually make it a reality in our everyday existence and operation within the organization.
Well, this has been a great conversation and I think a lot of food for thought and a lot of good ideas. And I think we've helped to, explain that there's benefits to diversity. I hope everyone can experience that in the way that I have in my career. And we appreciate the passion that you speak about this topic. It's wonderful to have someone who helps us understand what we're talking about. So thank you so much, Roselle, for joining us today. And to everyone out there, till we get a chance to be with you again, stay connected.